I didn't ask for this ship, the Mark 5 Cobra. As far as small ships go, I'd rather have had a Viper Mark 5 purely because I've always preferred the Viper over the Cobra. But beggars can't be choosers, and besides I like a small ship, so for now, this will do. I've said before that the Cobra Mark III is an iconic ship, a ship worthy of respect due to its history, especially around the conclusion of the First Thargoid War, so it does make sense for Faulcon Delacy to make a new version for the masses. There was also a Mark IV variant of the Cobra, but to own that version you need to be a member of an exclusive owners club, and I'm just simply unworthy of that. But from what I understand, the Cobra Mark IV isn't all that great anyway, not that I can judge, given that I'll likely never get the chance to fly one. So going forward, for all intents and purposes, we'll forget that the Mark IV exists. Let's look at this ship, the Mark V Cobra. Visually, as you can tell, it has the same lineage as its predecessors. It's got that familiar wedge-shaped hull, flat front and wide canopy. Inside you get a central pilot's chair, which remedies one of my gripes with the Mark III and its offset arrangement. You also have space to bring two friends along, plus you also have a section of transparency underneath your feet. Overall, there are definitely worse cockpits to be in. This cockpit is also larger than its predecessor, which makes sense since the Mark V is a larger ship overall, and with that comes more internal space, specifically more internal space of TARDIS proportions. Internally, I think it's fair to say the Mark V is largely better than the Mark III in most ways. I really want to say all ways, but I'm sure I've probably missed something. It's not really a surprise given the extra space and that it's a new model, because newer is apparently always better. But that's maybe not necessarily the case. It does have a larger hit profile, but it is still manoeuvrable enough to sit in the blind spot of most ships. One odd thing, you'd think that being bigger it would have a higher mass and mass lock factor than its predecessors, but it doesn't. Presumably it's made of some lightweight alloy that makes it lighter in spite of the size difference, which does also help it shift faster than its predecessors too. Another surprising thing is that the Mark V uses largely the same sizing of core modules as the Mark III. At a glance, the only one that's really different is the Mark V has a slightly larger power distributor, which is a necessity really, because that extra medium hardpoint that it has means I can have an extra railgun, and extra railguns mean extra power needs to be diverted to the weapons. Otherwise they get rendered a little bit pointless pretty quick. I mean, it's all good having 3 rails and a couple of burst lasers to look imposing to all other small ships, but if you can't power them, then you are going to be in for some severe performance anxiety. And I'm told no one likes that. Hardpoint placement also feels a little bit better than the Mark III, with most of the hardpoints near the front and the new medium being placed along the centre of the ship. For a small ship, it's difficult to work out where it stacks up against other small ships. Like other small ships, it's good enough to piss off the local Anaconda owning riffraff, as it will happily sit on another ship's tailpipe while blasting without too much trouble, so at least it's got that in common with its other small counterparts. But looking deeper, the Vulture has more punch, but the Mark V is quicker. The Viper is quicker, but it doesn't have the stopping power. I think if I had to compare this to another ship, I'd actually be comparing it to a medium ship instead. Specifically this one, the Asp Scout. They have comparable armour stats and only one hardpoint difference, and they're both reasonably manoeuvrable. But also, despite the size difference, the core modules are pretty similar, although the Mark V does have more internal capacity and space for 2 extra utility mounts. The Mark V is also significantly cheaper and better equipped, so maybe not a fair comparison after all. It's a similar story for trading too. The Mark V Cobra boasts a huge internal capacity for cargo, coming in at 110 tons, far outstripping any other small ship, and only being a few tons off the maximum capacity of the Type 6. Just to reiterate, the Type 6 is a medium and dedicated trade ship, yet only has a negligible capacity difference to the Mark V Cobra. I understand that both the Mandalay and the Type 8 from the class of 2024 for ultimately winning in their respective fields for their size, exploration and trade. But the Mark V Cobra is meant to be an all-rounder, rather than the go-to small ship for every discipline under the sun, which is also comparable to a good chunk of the medium ship roster. It's meant to be a jack of all trades, not a master of everything. This isn't new though. For the longest time, the Python MK1 held the rank of the ultimate all-round medium ship, comparable to many large ships, so I guess Faulcon Delacy have dug out the playbook they used when updating the MK1 Python to its current state and applied it to the MK5 Cobra. Exploration is also more than viable. I've seen theoretical builds that are nearly 70 light years per jump, plus you can get a size 4 fuel scoop on board assuming you're filling the size 5 slot with an FSD booster. Size 4 doesn't sound huge, don't get me wrong, but when your standard fuel tank is 16 tons, it's enough for a quick top up between systems. That being said, my Cobra MK5 is purely equipped as an all-rounder and gets far less range per jump, but even so, it's enough to hop from one side of the bubble to the other pretty quickly. If you throw an SRV bay in there, you've got something that will happily take you into the black to allow you to gather materials and scan some profitable biologicals. One of the main complaints about the Cobra MK3 that I've seen that it was able to do everything, but it was never particularly good at a single task, although I do frequently have a debate with another pilot who extols the virtues of the MK3 over the Viper in combat. FYI, either Viper is better than a MK3 Cobra, at least for me, but part of the glorious tapestry that is life is different opinions. I never wanted to say a Cobra was better than a Viper in this regard, but here I am. The MK5 is better than either Viper in combat. Although I'd say there isn't much in it between the MK4 Viper and the MK5 Cobra, but the MK5 still edges it. The MK5 Cobra can turn its hand to pretty much any task, and it makes a half decent job of it. So again, it's got a lot in common with the Python MK1. In fact, in this regard, I'd say it has more in common with the Python MK1 than the Python MK2 has with the Python MK1. But then I've also been told that the MK2 is a variant and not a straight upgrade, so what do I know? In conclusion, I like the Cobra MK5, I do. Given its multi-role capability and a small frame, I've thoroughly enjoyed running it through some power play objectives with it, among other things, as it's easily suited to most tasks that you want to throw at it. But I can't help the feeling it's a little too good at everything and doesn't have enough compromise for an all-rounder. And again, to stop banging on about the same point, I'd rather it was a Viper MK5. I know I've said that already, but if the powers that be are listening, and I suspect that they're not, in the words of Jean-Luc Picard, make it so. Think something similar but more of a focus on combat and less of a focus on everything else. A lean, mean merchant of death with the sort of boost that pins you into the back of your seat to the extent you can feel your ribs scraping against your spine. And when they're done creating that, then they can one-up it with a Vulture Mark II. But something with a little bit more soul than the Mark 1. I suspect I'm not alone with either of these wishes, but hey, let me know. By the way, I know I said that the Crate Phantom review was coming in place of this one, and really it is going to come next, unless FDev drop another small, lightweight, fun ship on us. I'll have the Phantom review done at some point soon. Until then, I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next one. Take care, much love, and 07. Thank you.